Welcome back to episode 4 of Grip Gains. If we're being honest, climbers love their excuses. Too reachy, morpho, height specific, awkward, sandbagged, polished. I could go on. While these factors exist, they mask a fundamental truth. The primary performance limiter in climbing is specific hand weakness. Let's start with a regional case study that perfectly illustrates our topic: the critical balance between the primary finger flexors, FDS and FDP. Two elite climbers, one region, and a decade of grading chaos. Hard climbing in Nova Scotia was developed by two climbers, Nick and Ghislain. They inadvertently created a natural experiment in muscle dominance. Nick, a professional climber seasoned on the international rock, would establish problems graded V13 that local specialists would later crush at V10. Meanwhile, Ghislain developed his strength here on Nova Scotia's notorious micro holds, setting V10s that an international pro Nick couldn't repeat. Same underlying grade, fundamentally different grip demands. The disparity wasn't about sandbagging, it was about specialized adaptation. Nick's strength came from FDS dominant training in commercial gyms and international sport climbing. Ghislain's power was developed through years of FDP intensive climbing on the local crimps. Their grading difference reflect physiological biases. The result was a decade of confusion. Modern gym climbers still gravitate towards Nick's lines while avoiding Ghislain's sandbagged problems. They're training in an FDS dominant environment and then wondering why FDP intensive routes feel impossible. Our goal through training is to become as even as possible in both grip types. Hard climbing on small holds and hard climbing on bigger holds. Easier said than done. Let's discuss the details. In our previous episodes, we established 3 core components for effective training: functional hand anatomy, exercise physiology, and the principles of exercise selection. Within the principles of exercise selection, we had 3 additional principles: optimal stimulation, maximum ergonomics, and minimizing training overlap. Today's analysis focuses on FDS and covers the 3 categories of training implements: climbing-specific tools, grip sport equipment, and custom solutions. Each category offers a distinct advantage and limitations for training FDS. FDS is the superficial finger flexor and our second most important climbing muscle. The relationship between FDP and FDS is more complex than most climbers realize. While FDP dominates on small hold climbing, FDS becomes increasingly important as hold size increases. This interaction creates a fundamental training challenge. It is extremely difficult to develop both systems equally. Most climbers unconsciously specialize and they gravitate towards movement that favors their stronger muscle group, creating a self-reinforcing cycle. This specialization becomes especially evident when establishing first ascents, as demonstrated in our Nova Scotia example. The grading process itself reflects this bias. Over time, consensus grades tend to reflect the difficulty for the optimally balanced athletes. When early developers have significant muscle imbalances, grade inconsistencies emerge. Nick's V13s weren't intentionally misgraded. They genuinely felt that hard to an FDS dominant climber attempting FDP intensive movement. For FDS training on climbing specific implements, the standard tool is the hangboard. Hold size is what matters here, not grip type. Small holds will be FDP predominant regardless of finger angle. For FDS training, we want large holds. The ideal hold size would be anatomically just larger than the distal phalanx. This requires hyperextension at the PIP joint. So it's more commonly trained with holds about the size of the distal phalanx. A 20 millimeter edge is common. This allows for the half crimp position. The pros: it is cheap and easily accessible. A scrap of wood and 2 nails will do it. In terms of optimal stimulation, it's mixed. The main issue with hangboards is the same as in episode 3. If you have even finger lengths, it is excellent. However, if, like me, you have uneven fingers, several fingers will be undertrained. This, however, is less of an issue than training with FDP in the 4-finger drag. The ergonomics here are better than with FDP. Large, rounded edges And rounded lips allow for better ergonomic positions for all fingers. However, with uneven finger lengths, it will end up being a mix of FDP and FDS dominant training. Training overlap is unavoidable. Climbers will always attempt to compensate with whatever their dominant finger flexors. Overall, the hangboard is a very acceptable option for FDS training. Conventional hangboard training is effective. Gym climbers consistently perform well on large holds. Consider the example of Waco Tanks. Gym-trained athletes often excel there despite limited outdoor experience. That is never the case here in Nova Scotia. In the grip sport category, spring grippers are the implement of choice. The pros are that they're inexpensive and they're one of the few implements that allow for the ideal concentric-eccentric style of training. For optimal stimulation, they're mixed. Similar to hangboards, they don't train all fingers evenly. The index finger in particular gets very poor training stimulus because of the gripper angle. To make these FDS specific, you want to train with a narrow range of motion. This is accomplished by setting the gripper. This is so necessary that setting is actually allowed in grip sport competition. Ergonomically, they're problematic. I trained on spring grippers for years with endless annoying injuries. Primarily, pressure in the palm from the very heavy grippers, as well as torsional forces on the knuckles. My knuckles would be swollen for 2 days after hard training sessions. Palm pressure can be mitigated with a handle extension. For minimizing training overlap, they're reasonable if you preset the gripper and limit their range. Finally, in the custom category, we have the offset edge. All the same considerations apply here as outlined in episode 3. Optimal stimulation, perfect ergonomics, and the very lowest training overlap. The issue with the custom category is that truly custom ergonomics are even more important than with the FDP offset edge because the weights used here are up to 400% higher. Let's construct the tier list for the 3 primary options for training FDS, starting with the hangboard with a 20mm edge. In terms of optimal stimulation, it is high. Excellent for even fingers. In terms of ergonomics, it is medium. The rounded edge definitely reduces finger stress. Some finger torsion is unavoidable, but less than with the 4-finger drag. This varies by hand anatomy. In terms of training overlap, it is a mixed picture. Some FDP engagement for sure, and unavoidable compensation depending on your dominant grip type. Overall, hangboard training for FDS is very good and is solidly A tier. Up next, let's do spring grippers. In terms of optimal stimulation, it is high, but with caveats, being poor index finger training. You get good concentric-eccentric loading, which is a benefit seen in no other training device. The ergonomics, though, are downright poor. You get palm pressure issues and significant finger torsion as you close the gripper. Training overlap is minimal. It's very FDS specific, especially when you preset the gripper. Overall, though, I'm going to have to put the spring gripper in B tier. And finally, the custom offset edge. In terms of optimal stimulation, it is the highest. You get perfect individual finger loading. In terms of ergonomics, again, it's the highest. It is custom fitted to my hand anatomy and customized in multiple dimensions. In terms of training overlap, again, it's the highest. There is minimal FDP engagement and the highest degree of isolation possible. No surprise, I'm going to put the custom offset edge here into S tier. It has all the benefits of the hangboard with significant additional benefits. To recap, the path to optimal finger strength requires understanding your current muscle dominance, selecting appropriate training tools, and then loading across the force curve. The key takeaways are that muscle imbalance, not morphology, is the main performance limiter in climbing. Our goal isn't to eliminate FDS or FDP dominance, but to develop both systems equally. This balanced development expands your climbing style options, reduces your injury risk, increases grade consistency, and elevates your overall potential. Let's now check in with Seb for a discussion of our personal selections. So we are back with Seb to review our exercise selection for the forearm extrinsics. Last time we talked about FDP. Today we're going to talk about FDS. Seb started last time. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
So for FDS, we have a custom gripper similar to last time. The difference this time is that we are using larger ledge that allows for significantly more finger curl and puts us into that optimal zone where we're training FDS. In the past, my core training for FDS was the spring grippers. I gravitated away from the spring grippers for two primary reasons. One is that they don't train index finger. Anybody who gets a lot of crushing strength from those grippers will have notably weak index fingers. I suffered from that quite a lot. The crushing grip is a very strong grip and you can do a ton of weight. You said you have a world record in a crushing grip for time. I found when training with that kind of weight, when you're closing that spring gripper and sliding down the handle, there's a fair bit of torsional force on the fingers, and I was having knuckle pain, specifically in my big finger, and occasionally pain in the palm of the hand with the handle digging in.
Yeah, I kind of got pain in there too, from the handle just digging in.
Very effective training tool. I got some good strength gains. It really translated well in my climbing, and I climbed through the V grades training on that. But ultimately, I retired it when I came to something that better suited the principles of strength training. So this is where I'm at, the offset grip.
Yeah, so I use the same. It's been amazing, so much better than what I used to use previously. And again, the classic kind of block or hangboard where you're just kind of doing a half crimp on a 20 mil edge, right? Because you're still kind of getting that flexion at the same joint. But as you can see, like, there's also a lot of lumbricals being involved there, and I still am engaging my FDP. Fingers aren't all in the same kind of position, like the pinky's in that kind of more open hand position.
And you can see there your height. The big issue I have with why I went to the crusher gripper and not to the edge is that you're hyperextended through that distal finger joint.
Yep.
And that to me, I have stiff claw-like fingers, and that just feels horrible, personally, from an ergonomic point of view.
And again, you're running into the same problem of it's usually a wood hold, the friction's going to come into play so much, temperature and all that. So this is just such nice because it's like you pick it up every time, it's going to feel the same, you're going to hit all your fingers in the same way, and again, targeting just the one muscle, or as much as you can, just the one muscle.
Right. Well, it's getting cold out here. My hands are going numb. I think that's enough for today. Stay tuned for episode 5, where we will finish the forearm extrinsics.